The birthday party was everything my 7-year-old grandson Jake could have dreamed of. Balloons covered the backyard, a bounce house dominated the lawn, and my daughter-in-law Victoria had spared no expense on decorations. The fine china was laid out perfectly on the outdoor dining table, her grandmother's antique set that she was so proud of. I watched from the kitchen window as she directed the caterers, her voice carrying that familiar tone of authority she used when she wanted everyone to know she was in charge. "Make sure everything is perfect," she told them. "This party is going to be featured in my lifestyle blog. I need it to look absolutely flawless." Victoria had built a modest following online by showcasing what she called elevated family living. Beautiful photos of perfectly arranged meals, designer children's clothes, and carefully curated family moments. What her followers didn't see was how she achieved that perfection, or who she stepped on to get there. I'd been living in the small apartment above their garage for 8 months, ever since I'd had to sell my house due to what the family believed were financial difficulties. The truth was more complicated, but I'd let them draw their own conclusions about my circumstances. "Eleanor, could you help bring out the appetizers?" Victoria called through the window, her voice sweet for the benefit of the arriving guests. I carried the silver trays outside, noting how she'd arranged everything with magazine-quality precision. Parents were arriving with their children, and Victoria was in her element, playing the perfect hostess. "Oh, this is my mother-in-law Eleanor," she introduced me to a group of well-dressed mothers. "She helps out around the house." The way she said helps out made it clear I was staff, not family. Several of the women nodded politely but quickly turned their attention back to Victoria, who was describing the organic, locally sourced ingredients in the appetizers. My son Michael approached with Jake bouncing beside him. "Mom, thanks for helping with everything. Victoria's been working so hard to make this special." "Of course, dear. Anything for Jake." I ruffled my grandson's hair. He was the one bright spot in this increasingly difficult living situation. "Grandma Eleanor, did you see the bounce house? It's huge." Jake's eyes were wide with excitement. "I did. Have you tried it yet?" "Victoria says I have to wait until after pictures. She wants to get shots of the party before anything gets messy." Before I could respond, Victoria appeared at my elbow. "Eleanor, could you please go get the plates from the kitchen? The caterers need to start serving lunch." I walked back into the house, passing through the living room where Victoria had displayed photos from their recent European vacation. 23 days in Italy and France, staying at luxury hotels and dining at Michelin-starred restaurants. She'd documented every moment on social media, building her brand as a lifestyle influencer. What she didn't know was that I'd been quietly funding that lifestyle for over 2 years. In the kitchen, I gathered the stack of fine china plates, 12 place settings of Royal Crown Derby that Victoria had inherited from her grandmother. As I carried them outside, I noticed the guests gathering around the beautifully decorated table. "Let me help you with those," offered Mrs. Patterson, one of the mothers I'd met earlier. "Thank you, that's very kind." We began setting places at the long table. The china gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, each piece carefully polished and positioned. Victoria supervised from nearby, making small adjustments and ensuring everything photographed perfectly. "All right everyone, lunch is served," Victoria announced. "Please find your seats." The guests moved toward the table, and I started to follow when Victoria caught my arm. "Eleanor, I set up a spot for you over there." She pointed to a small card table positioned away from the main gathering, set with a single paper plate and plastic utensils. I stared at the sad little table, then at the elegant china setting where even the 7-year-olds were eating from priceless antique plates. I assumed I'd be sitting with the family," I said quietly. Victoria's smile was brittle. "Well, you're not really a guest, are you? You're here to help. Besides, I didn't want to risk you breaking any of the good china. These plates are irreplaceable." Several nearby guests had overheard and were watching our exchange with obvious discomfort. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my expression neutral. "Of course. How thoughtful of you to provide a separate table." I took my paper plate and moved to the card table, where Victoria had placed a small portion of the catered food. While everyone else enjoyed herb-crusted salmon and artisanal sides, my plate held a basic sandwich and some potato chips. From my isolated spot, I watched Jake open his presents. When he tore open my gift, a vintage train set that had cost me $3,000. Victoria quickly moved it aside. "How nice, a used toy," she announced loudly enough for the guests to hear. "We'll put that away safely." The other gifts were displayed prominently on the present table: iPads, designer clothes, expensive electronics. My carefully chosen vintage train set was tucked behind a potted plant, out of sight. As the party continued, I noticed how Victoria positioned herself for photos, always making sure I was cropped out of family shots. When Jake ran over to show me his new bicycle, she quickly called him back to pose with the important gifts. "Jake, come get pictures with your real presents," she said sweetly. Mrs. Patterson approached my little table, her expression concerned. "Eleanor, would you like to come sit with us? There's plenty of room." Before I could answer, Victoria appeared. "Oh, that's so sweet of you to offer, but Eleanor prefers to eat separately. Don't you, Eleanor? You always say you like the quiet." I'd never said anything of the sort, but arguing would only create a scene at Jake's party. "The quiet is lovely," I agreed, taking another bite of my sandwich. The party lasted until evening. I helped clean up while Victoria supervised, making sure I didn't handle any of the valuable china. As the last guests left, I heard her on the phone with someone, presumably a friend. The party was perfect. Everyone was so impressed. "Yes, the china photographs beautifully." "Oh, Michael's mother? She's fine, she helps around the house. Very convenient having live-in help, actually." Live-in help. That's how she described me to her friends. That night, in my small apartment above the garage, I sat at my computer and opened several browser windows. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, property records, and business documents filled my screen. The modest lifestyle I'd been maintaining while living here was about to come to an end. Victoria wanted to treat me like hired help? Tomorrow, she'd learn exactly who had been helping whom. I opened my phone and called my property manager. "Hello, James? It's Eleanor Morrison. I need you to serve some eviction notices tomorrow morning." "Yes, the Riverside Drive property. Both the main house and the commercial building downtown." I paused, looking out my window at the main house where Victoria was probably editing party photos for her blog. "Make sure they are delivered early. I want them to understand their situation clearly." The next call was to my attorney, then to my accountant, and finally to the bank that held the mortgage. On Michael's marketing company. Victoria had spent months making me feel small and unwanted. She'd humiliated me in front of strangers and treated me like a burden to be hidden away. Tomorrow, she'd discover that the woman she'd been calling the help actually owned everything she thought belonged to her. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 a.m. I watched from my window as Victoria answered the door in her silk robe, expecting maybe a package delivery. Instead, she found a man in a suit holding an official envelope. "Victoria Hartwell." "Yes. You're being served with an eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate these premises." I couldn't hear her response, but I saw her stumble backward, the papers fluttering from her hands. She stood in the doorway for a full minute, staring at the documents, before Michael appeared beside her. My son was already dressed for work, coffee mug in hand, when he saw his wife holding legal papers with shaking hands. "What's going on? Victoria, what is this?" She looked up at him with wild eyes. "They're trying to evict us. This says we have to leave our house in 30 days. That's impossible. We own this house." "That's what I thought." Her voice was rising to a panicked pitch. "This has to be some kind of mistake. Or maybe your mother did something stupid with the paperwork when she moved in. Maybe she screwed up our legal documents somehow." I watched Michael examine the papers, his expression growing more confused by the second. "This says the property owner is Morrison Holdings LLC. I've never heard of that company." "Call our real estate agent," Victoria demanded. "Call the bank. Someone is trying to steal our house." While they made frantic phone calls, a second process server arrived. This one was heading for Michael's car as he backed out of the driveway. "Michael Hartwell? You're being served regarding the foreclosure proceedings on Hartwell Marketing Solutions." Michael's BMW stopped so abruptly I heard the brakes squeal from my window. "Foreclosure? On my business? The loan payments are 6 months overdue, sir. The bank is exercising its right to foreclose on all business assets." I couldn't see Michael's face from this distance, but I watched him sit in his car for several minutes, holding the papers, before slowly driving back into the driveway. Victoria met him at the front door, her panic now full-blown hysteria. "Michael, what's happening? First the house, now your business? How could we not know about any of this?" "I don't understand," Michael said, his voice hollow. "The business has been profitable. The house payments have been automatic. None of this makes sense." That's when Victoria looked up at my apartment window and saw me watching. Her expression shifted from panic to rage in an instant. "This is her fault," she hissed, pointing at my window. "That vindictive old woman did something. She's trying to destroy us because I didn't let her sit at the main table yesterday. Mom wouldn't, she couldn't." Michael's voice trailed off as he realized he didn't actually know what I could or couldn't do. Victoria was already storming toward the garage stairs, taking them two at a time. I heard her pounding on my door. "Eleanor, open this door right now." I opened it calmly, fully dressed and holding my morning coffee. "Good morning, Victoria. You're up early." "What did you do?" she screamed. "What did you do to our house? To Michael's business?" "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me. These eviction papers, the foreclosure, this is because of yesterday, isn't it? Because I made you eat at a separate table." I tilted my head thoughtfully. "The separate table? Oh no, dear. That was just the final confirmation that I'd made the right decision." "What decision?" "The decision to stop subsidizing your lifestyle." Michael appeared at the top of the stairs, breathing hard. "Mom, what is she talking about?" I invited them both into my small apartment and gestured for them to sit on my modest couch. From my filing cabinet, I retrieved a thick folder of documents. "For the past 2 years, I've been quietly paying your mortgage, Michael. The house payments you thought were automatic? They were coming from my accounts." Michael stared at me. "That's impossible. Morrison Holdings LLC is my company. I purchased your mortgage when you were struggling to qualify for the loan." I opened the folder and showed them the paperwork. "I also own the building where your marketing company operates, and I hold the loan on your business equipment." Victoria snatched the papers from my hands, scanning them frantically. This can't be real." "It's very real. For 24 months, I've been supporting your family while watching you treat me like unwanted help." My voice remained calm and matter-of-fact. "Yesterday, you served me lunch on a paper plate while 7-year-olds ate from priceless china. You introduced me to your friends as hired help. You hid my gift to Jake and excluded me from family photos." But why?" Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had no power. I wanted to understand what kind of people you'd become." I closed the folder gently. "Now I know." Victoria's panic was transforming into desperate anger. "You can't do this. We have a child. You can't make your own grandson homeless. Jake will be fine. I've already spoken with family services about temporary housing arrangements. There are several excellent family shelters that provide transitional support." "Shelters?" Victoria's voice cracked. "You want us to live in shelters? I want you to understand what it feels like to have no control over your living situation. To be dependent on others' kindness. To wonder if you're welcome in your own home." My phone rang, and I answered it on speaker. "Mrs. Morrison? This is David from First National Bank. We've completed the audit you requested on the Hartwell accounts. It appears there have been unauthorized charges totaling over $89,000 in the past year." Victoria went white. "Unauthorized charges?" "Credit cards opened in Eleanor Morrison's name, using her social security number and forged documents. The charges include luxury travel, designer purchases, and cash advances." Michael turned to stare at his wife. "Victoria, what is he talking about?" I can explain. The charges match perfectly with your European vacation and recent shopping sprees," I said quietly. "You've been committing identity theft, Victoria. Using my credit to fund your influencer lifestyle." The room fell silent except for Victoria's rapid breathing. "Mrs. Morrison," the banker continued, "we have all the documentation ready for the police report. Should we proceed with filing charges?" "Yes, Please do. Victoria jumped up from the couch. You can't prove anything. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward them. Actually, I can prove everything. I've been documenting your spending patterns for months. Every forged signature, every unauthorized charge, every instance of fraud. On the screen was a detailed spreadsheet showing dates, amounts, and corresponding social media posts. Victoria's Italian vacation photos were matched with credit card charges made in my name. Her designer handbag posts corresponded with fraudulent purchases. You've been stealing from me for over a year while treating me like garbage in my own son's home, I continued. A home that I was secretly paying for. Michael looked between his wife and his mother, his world crumbling in real time. Victoria, please tell me this isn't true. Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. She was just sitting there with all that money. Living like some poor old lady when she could have been helping us. I thought she was being selfish. So you stole from her. We needed those things. My blog, my career, it all depends on maintaining a certain image. She was holding us back. I stood up slowly. You stole from me. You committed fraud in my name. You humiliated me in front of strangers. And you convinced my son that I was a burden he had to tolerate. Mom, I never thought. You never thought at all, Michael. You just went along with whatever made your life easier. There was a knock at the door. Through the window, I could see police cars in the driveway. That would be the officers coming to arrest Victoria for identity theft and fraud. Victoria's legs gave out, and she collapsed back onto the couch. Please, Eleanor. I'll pay everything back. I'll apologize. We can work this out as a family. Family. I looked at her with genuine curiosity. Is that what you call making me eat alone on paper plates? Is that what you call stealing my identity to fund your vacations? The police knocked again. Coming. I called out, then turned back to Victoria and Michael. You have 30 days to vacate the house. Victoria will likely be in jail, so Michael, you'll need to handle the moving arrangements. Jake can stay with me until you find somewhere suitable. Where are we supposed to go? Michael asked desperately. I don't know, I said, opening the door for the officers. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't worth basic human decency. The arrest was swift and professional. Victoria tried to maintain her innocence until the officers showed her the evidence. Bank records, forged signatures, and detailed financial forensics that painted an undeniable picture of systematic fraud. I want to call my lawyer, she said as they placed her in handcuffs. You'll have that opportunity at the station, the lead officer replied. Mrs. Morrison, we'll need you to come in later this week to provide a formal statement. After they drove away with Victoria, Michael and I sat in my small apartment, the weight of revelations settling between us. Mom, I don't understand any of this. If you have money, if you own property, why have you been living like this? I poured him a cup of coffee and settled into my chair. After your father died, I inherited his construction business. Instead of selling it, I expanded. Morrison Holdings now owns 43 properties across the state, including shopping centers, office buildings, and residential complexes. 43 properties. The construction business became a development company. We build affordable housing, commercial spaces, and mixed-use communities. I pulled out my tablet and showed him the company website. Last year's revenue was just over $12 million. Michael stared at the screen, scrolling through photos of gleaming office buildings and residential complexes, all bearing the Morrison Holdings logo. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to see what kind of man you'd become. I wanted to know if you'd care for your mother when you thought she had nothing to offer you. And you failed, Michael. You chose the easy path. When Victoria treated me poorly, you made excuses for her. When she excluded me from family events, you said nothing. When she made me eat alone while children dined on fine china, you thought that was acceptable. Michael's shoulders sagged. I thought she was just stressed about money. I thought if I could keep the peace. You thought wrong. I leaned forward. Michael, do you know what your son asked me last month? What? He asked why Mommy doesn't like Grandma Eleanor. A 7-year-old child could see what you chose to ignore. We sat in silence for several minutes. Through the window, I could see neighbors gathering on their porches, drawn by the police cars and the drama unfolding in what they'd thought was a perfect suburban family. What happens now? Michael asked finally. Victoria will likely face 5 to 7 years in prison for the fraud charges. The restitution amount is over $200,000 when you include interest and damages. And the house? You have 30 days to vacate. I'm selling it to a family that actually needs it. Mom, please. Jake loves this house. It's the only home he's ever known. Jake will adapt. Children are resilient when they're not being taught to disrespect their elders. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. That's my real estate agent. Apparently, Victoria's lifestyle blog has been discovered by her followers. Someone posted screenshots of the arrest on social media. Michael winced. How bad is it? I turned my phone screen toward him. Victoria's Instagram account was flooded with comments. Her followers had connected the dots: the luxury lifestyle, the sudden disappearance, the news reports about fraud charges. Fake influencer lives fake life with stolen money, I read aloud. This is why I never trust lifestyle bloggers. Imagine stealing from your elderly mother-in-law to fund Instagram posts. Her carefully curated brand was destroyed within hours. Sponsors were already distancing themselves, removing her from partnership programs and demanding refunds for products she'd promoted. 20,000 followers yesterday. Down to 3,000 and falling. Michael put his head in his hands. She worked so hard on that blog. She worked hard on an illusion built with stolen money. I set down my phone. Michael, I need you to understand something. This isn't about revenge. This is about consequences. It feels like revenge. Does it? Let me tell you what revenge would look like. I opened another folder from my filing cabinet. Revenge would be me calling your employer to discuss your productivity issues. I own 30% of your company, Michael. I could have you fired tomorrow. His head snapped up. You own part of my company. Revenge would be me pressing charges against you for enabling financial abuse. Revenge would be me fighting for custody of Jake based on your failure to protect him from witnessing elder abuse. You wouldn't. I could. But I won't. Because despite everything, you're still my son. I closed the folder. However, our relationship going forward will be very different. Different how? You'll earn back my trust, not demand it. You'll demonstrate respect, not expect it. And you'll prove that you can be the father Jake deserves, not the enabler you've been. Over the next week, Michael moved out of the house in stages. I helped him find a modest apartment across town, paying the deposit and first month's rent, not as a gift, but as a loan with clear repayment terms. Jake stayed with me during the transition. We spent the days exploring my real home, a sprawling estate on the lake that I'd purchased 5 years earlier. He was amazed by the game room, the pool, and the workshop where I still tinkered with construction projects. Grandma Eleanor, are you rich? He asked one evening as we fed the ducks at the lake's edge. I'm comfortable, sweetheart. Why didn't you live in this house before? Because I wanted to understand what kind of people your parents really were. And now you know. I looked at this sweet, innocent child who'd been caught in the middle of adult failures. Will mommy come home soon? Not for a while, Jake. But you'll visit her when you're older, if you want to. The custody arrangements were surprisingly smooth. Michael didn't fight my request for primary custody of Jake during Victoria's incarceration. He seemed to understand that I was offering stability that he couldn't provide. Victoria's trial took 8 months. She pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence, receiving 4 years in prison with possibility of parole after 2.5 years. The restitution order would follow her for decades. From prison, she wrote me one letter. It arrived 6 months into her sentence. Eleanor, I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know that I understand now what I did. Not just the stealing, but the way I treated you. I made Michael choose between us, and I convinced him that you were the problem. I was wrong about everything. I hope someday Jake can understand why I'm not there for him. Please don't let him think this is his fault. I never responded to the letter, but I kept it. Someday, when Jake was older, he might want to read his mother's apology. Michael and I began rebuilding our relationship slowly. He attended therapy to understand how he'd enabled abuse, and we met for coffee once a week to discuss his progress. He was learning to be a single father, finding his footing without Victoria's manipulation. 6 months after the arrest, he said something that surprised me. "Mom, I need to thank you." "For what?" "For stopping me before I became someone I couldn't live with. I was becoming cruel, and I didn't even realize it." "You were being manipulated, Michael. But you also chose the easy path instead of the right one." "I know. And I'm sorry. Not just for what happened, but for who I was becoming." As for me, I moved back into my lakefront home with Jake and resumed my real life. Morrison Holdings continued to grow, and I threw myself into new projects: affordable housing developments for families in transition, support programs for fraud victims, and a foundation focused on elder advocacy. The paper plate incident at Jake's birthday party had been the final straw, but it wasn't the real crime. The real crime was a family that had forgotten how to love without conditions, how to respect without benefit, how to choose kindness over convenience. Victoria had thought she was punishing a powerless old woman by making her eat alone on disposable plates. Instead, she'd revealed herself to be someone who would humiliate a family member for the sake of appearances. The eviction notices that arrived the next morning weren't revenge, they were simply the natural consequences of treating family like disposable help. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty isn't anger or retaliation. Sometimes it's simply removing yourself from people who don't deserve your grace, and letting them discover what they've lost. Jake still asks about the birthday party sometimes. He doesn't understand why his mother served me food on a paper plate while everyone else used the fancy dishes. "That wasn't very nice, was it, Grandma?" "No, sweetheart. It wasn't." "Will I ever do something like that?" "Not if I can help it," I tell him. "Not if I can help it."